Hi, so these are coming pretty fast and loose right now because I need to catch up if I'm going to read this in a year live here on this channel. So I'm squeezing them in because I just want to catch up because by the end of May, I need to be at 125, page 125. And right now I'm at 96. So we're getting somewhere. I think we're moving right along. So what I want to squeeze in tonight and whatever time of day you're watching this is a Sunday night for me right now, is we're in the interruptions and stressors of the second hub. And I just this morning read the enmeshment and the lacking of emotional boundary and differentiation. And in that section, I talked a little bit about reparative conscious practices. And one of the other things that popped into my head today as I was out and about was the like repairing the notion that you have to earn pleasure. And this is like just, I mean, and maybe like even just introducing the idea that pleasure could just happen for pleasure's sake without having like exercise to earn food, without having worked hard to earn relaxing, and maybe just more about that there's actually kind of like a natural balance that working hard feels good. Like rest feels good with working hard, and and less of the notion of having to kind of like rob the purity of the enjoyment of just it, like being like, look, even if I hadn't worked hard, that this would be something that is, I'm worthy of, that and so anyway, yeah, so I'm gonna read. I'm gonna get to work here. So come along with me. And as you can see, I've been outside all day. I'm a little like, it's funny, these tinsels, it's weird. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about them, but they get a lot of comments that are really nice. And I'm realizing that they do kind of stand out, even though there's really only a few of them. It's kind of cute. So we'll see how long these stay. So probably not that much longer because I do have to do some quasi professional stuff coming up where I have to look sort of serious. Yeah. So, well, whatever. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Okay. So, I'm going to start reading right now. Here we go. Parents who have limited emotional capacity with a shrinking adaptation may create a home environment in which children feel like they are walking on eggshells, attempting to avoid disdain or punishment. In this home, children are told they're too sensitive when they express emotion. Being too sensitive is not an objective assessment. It's mic drop. It's subjective and relative to the parent's capacity for handling the emotions of others. Ooh, this is such a big point. Okay. These parents are simply referring to their incapacity to handle their children's emotions. Young children cannot understand this and will likely internalize this assessment as a personal flaw, which can feel like a bind when parents don't provide tools for understanding and processing feelings and emotions, leading to guilt, frustration, and shame. Yeah, I imagine this is gonna come up again here because it's just too important a point, but, like, when people tell you you're too much, you're being too emotional, you're being too dramatic or whatever, um, there is no objective measurement of, like, what is enough and is too much. Like, the fact of the matter is that how you feel is how you feel, and people do have a right to their boundaries as far as what they can actually handle and are capable of processing in a way that makes sense for them. But that's a different matter than kind of spinning it back on the person and saying it's an issue that they have. Like it's like they are too much. And especially with children, it's kind of confusing for a child to be told that it's like whatever's naturally arising is too much, or that there's something kind of inherently wrong with it. So I'm going to keep reading. The emotionally intolerant home will usually be very polarized, with parents speaking in black and white obsoletes and showing very little curiosity about the inner lives of their children. Small talk will be familiar, and many circuit breakers will be used to stop the flow of emotions, perhaps using some of the following responses. Dismissing. You have no right to feel that way. Manners and politeness. You're being rude. That's not very nice. Prematurely pushing for positivity. Look at the bright side. Correcting. I think what you're trying to say is, or hate is a strong word. Finding, fixing, and advising, rushing to a solution. You're talking about this when you could be doing something to fix it. Yeah, so that's actually a pause on that, like to elaborate. I think one of the things there's a lot about it's like women like talking about stuff and men like fixing it. And I don't know that that's necessarily, I mean, I think some of that is like related to socialization, but I do think in general, men have the like unfortunate like commonality is being socialized to not be emotional. So their capacity in and of itself is limited. So so it's like the masculine response of trying to solve something, it's like kind of a limitation of emotional capacity because it's not like a male, like, yeah. And also for women wanting to, like this is almost like a shrinking and inflating adaptation thing, because the notion of like then you've got women that all they want to do is talk about their feelings, so that's inflating when it's actually not contained and it's just like blast off. And I'm not saying that that's what women do, but as far as like having like socially sanctioned permission to be able to like actually like do that, even though it's like sort of considered a lesser presentation of oneself, social or from a power perspective, or whatever, from a misogynistic culture kind of perspective. So anyway, okay, I'm going to continue. So another of the circuit breakers is the polite cutoff. Well, that's nice, honey. It sounds like you have a strong opinion about that. And then the other circuit breaker here is silent treatment. So, used as punishment when a child becomes upset and the parent becomes impatient or angry about it, calling out any emotional expression as insubordination. So, I'm going to read back through what the circuit breakers are. So, the circuit breaker of dismissing, you have no right to feel that way. The circuit breaker of manners and politeness, you're being rude, that's not very nice. And when I'm saying circuit breaker, I'm meaning tactics that are used to stop the flow of emotion. Pushing for like prematurely pushing for positivity, look on the bright side. And that's like when you're having a feeling about something bad that happened and you're still having feelings about it and you're told to like, it's like, hey, look on the bright side, before the storm of the feelings has passed. Because there's kind of like a natural arc of an experience. And then you kind of come out on the other side and it's like, the right side is it could, something, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Another circuit breaker is the fixing and advising, which we just discussed, rushing to a solution. The polite cutoff as a circuit breaker. Well, that's nice, honey. It sounds like you have a strong opinion about that. And then silent treatment, very common. And silent treatment's passed down. It's a real, like, silent treatment is one of those things as far as like an emotional circuit breaker, is that a lot of times when people are doing the silent treatment, it's actually that their circuit has like broken and that they're overwhelmed, and are sort of in a blank spot, like are either, maybe like hypoarousal in like I think the Dan Siegel model of the window of tolerance, which is just kind of blanking out a bit just from overwhelm. So Yeah. So silent treatment is usually, when one person's kind of like sort of not really like able to actually like have full command of themselves, and they're kind of waiting to kind of thaw out without in some cases knowing that they're doing it, and then the other party is kind of like, feeling abandoned. So, all right, those are the circuit breakers. So, this home is like a museum. It feels cold and quiet. Meals can be repetitive or bland, and the only nurture children receive happens when they're sick, because illness falls within the responsibility of physical care. Some children raised in these homes will fake being sick to be or become hypochondrial. Yeah, that, to experience nurture and rest, a pattern that can extend into adulthood. And this is another thing. I mean, a lot of like a repetition with TPM is about um like really changing our relationship with like blaming and shaming ourselves about the patterns that we have. And like when we see ourselves do maybe see, if you're like, if perhaps you tend towards doing this, where it's like you like kind of like being being sick, or like actually like emphasizing illness or whatever, is to kind of like look for this part of that, which is like, as an adaptation, what was it solving for? And to respect that. And now say, and so it's like respecting that instead of being like, oh my God, what a, whatever, being sick, hypochondriac, whatever, is to search that out in ourselves and have compassion for it. And then when we see it arise, have compassion for that aspect of ourselves, and also evaluate like that's happening, and evaluate the core need that it's actually solving for. So if it has to do with feeling and emotion, is trying to stay with yourself, or and even noting to say like, oh, it really looks like right now I need some nurture and care. And the more work we do to understand what that is and what that looks like and what that feels like being the most important. It's like a lot can shift in that. I'll give a personal example. So I was supposed to go see my sister for a birthday dinner, and when I showed up at the car rental place, they didn't have my car. And it's like a really busy weekend in the city right now, right in the center of the city. And I was really upset. I hadn't been upset in a long time. And I was really angry and sad. I call it like mad sad. And as I was heading home, I had this like, I was like, whoa, the thing I wanted to do, I like wanted to go and get like there's this like Greek frozen yogurt at this place. And normally I'll like, if I'm kind of out for a walk and I kind of want to give myself a little treat, I might do something like go and sit and get a little one and make it with olive oil and sea salt, and it's like buttery and delicious and just really interesting and good. And I just had this thing where I could feel with my mad sadness, overwhelmed by the feeling that I felt the craving and the urge to go get one of those yogurts, but I wanted to eat it at home, like curled up, like watching TV. So it was kind of like, and so giving this as an example about like how to work with this stuff, which was like, I just saw it and I was like, oh, that's how you feel right now. Like the thing about like seeing that it's like the strong emotions had led to that adaptation being activated. And then as a result of that, that I could be with myself in a different way. I want not yet, like, I mean, like, I don't want to get into the thing of like, and then I didn't do it, which isn't the point. Honestly, like, I mean, I didn't do it. So but it's more just that, and because if I did it, wouldn't, that's not, if I had, that's not, and it like kind of the issue. It's just more that I was able to be like really present with myself and understand that, wow, if I like had that urge or that craving, that really represented that like I was feeling the need to be comforted, and so I went about comforting that in ways that were closer to what we call like primary comforts, like connecting with people, yeah, and being heard and seen. And so, yeah, there's that. All right, I'm going to keep reading. So, in cases of moral or religious severity, children can seek the approval of their parents by becoming rigid. Rachel, a woman I interviewed, strained to please her strict parents by being a perfect teenager. No sex, no drinking, earning excellent grades, and following all the rules. The only approval she can remember receiving was when she would parrot the restrictive values of her parents' faith. She wanted their support and resented the means required to receive it. The only television that was allowed was religious or G rated. Oh, I'm going to put the book back up for the whole thing. Her mother would say in a small, pinched voice that concealed her intense, punitive disposition that there was no point in so called dark entertainment. As an adult, Rachel avoided all movies that were dark, dramatic, suspenseful, and horror based. When she and her boyfriend Jamal started dating, she repeated her mother's words about dark entertainment as her own. And Jamal said, "I think you're afraid of emotions," which gave her pause, but elicited her curiosity. Rachel had seen a scary movie the previous year and had been disturbed for days afterwards. After considering Jamal's words and doing some conscious reclaiming of her emotional awareness, see the exercises that like following in this chapter, she watched the film again. To her surprise, this time was different. It was dark and scary, but I was able to pay more attention to the message and societal commentary and not get overwhelmed. Yeah. It's a good one. It's a good one. I'll leave it there for now. So that's the next the next section is the circus, the emotionally chaotic home. I guess we'll get to that probably tomorrow because I'm going to need to keep going as we work through getting to on track to do this in a year. But this is, the circus is the opposite. So it's kind of like, look, in terms of adaptations, the museum is the shrinking adaptation, sort of like, I guess, turned into an environment. And the circus, the emotionally chaotic home, is like the inflating adaptation, like in an environment. And while it is that like likely that if you're raised in one style of home that you'll have and like adaptations that mirror, it's not always the case. So I'm just looking here. Let's see. What time is it? I think I'm going to read this. I think I'm going to read it. I'm going to start at least. So the just looking at how I'm a little sunburned. Okay, so parents generally control the emotional climate in a home, and emotionally immature parents can be emotionally unregulated, yet chastise their children for being emotional, further adding to a child's confusion about its emotions. In both the museum and the circus, nothing emotional is dealt with directly. In the museum, a child's emotions are usually dismissed or invalidated, while the parents emote, criticize, and complain, using lack of expressiveness or labeling their feelings as facts to disguise their underlying heightened and emotional nature. But in the circus, The home is full of excessive emotional expression that's often loud, while there will be one or more elephant in the room issue that never gets mentioned. In both the museum and the circus, talking about complex emotional topics happens behind people's backs, never directly with them unless it's in an explosion of frustration or anger. One example is a mother who complains to her child about its father's inconsiderate behavior, but when the father comes home, says nothing to him about her frustrations. Also, a pattern in divorce can be parents who don't communicate with each other, but complain about or insult the other parent in the child's presence. Children who are starved for attention may bathe in the parental engagement that's in short supply, not realizing that their parents are using them to process their own emotions, often without awareness of or concern for the effect on the child's emotional development and the inner conflicts this creates. Woo! Okay. That's a strong one. Holy cow. Yeah. Yeah, it's so I was like I had an exchange with someone today, and they mentioned that they're rereading this chapter, and so I am too, right? Right now. And the thing was, and so that got me thinking. I started thinking about this and about what's happening to me right now as I'm reading it, and reading it as a reader versus writing it and researching it. And this was particularly like, and it's actually reading it for the first time, possibly in a year, which is like wild to think about. Like, well, I mean, when it was in proofreading, it was kind of like I was sort of reading it, but not really like reading it this way, or I'm really consuming it. I have the reader's experience with it. Like this stuff, it's like, whoa, I didn't like I can it's kind of an interesting combination because I can read it and have this recognition and memory of how this came together. But I'm also having the experience of it actually increasing my own capacity as I'm getting like a deeper look into something, and I'm like teasing out and opening up more of my own self in this hub. And this is the practice. It's ongoing. And it stops or it starts, wherever you want it to. But that one is really strong for me. Like I got I was like, woo. Just the whole thing about like how the museum and the chaotic home, that or the circus, it's like that in general. The thing is there's plenty of emotions happening. they're just they're just like labeled as like, and this is like a whole topic that actually I want to avoid because it's such a tangent, but just the whole relabeling of emotions depending on who's having them. And it usually has to do with the person in power having the emotion and calling it something other than an emotion. So they're reducing the notion that it could possibly be illogical. So it's like, so the thing about being sort of like emotions being labeled as, or like considered as, like unstable or hysterical or unhinged or whatever, is a tactic to actually like kind of build stature over that party. And you see that with, like, in these cases parentally, you see that with racism, the thing of like, oh, they're just angry Black people, or you see it with misogyny, which is like, oh, she's being hysterical. But I mean, as a woman who's been the only woman in rooms with executives, it's like, I mean, all they do is talk, it's like they're talking about other people. They're talking about all these things that happened, and this happened, that happened, and oh my God, like retelling stories. I mean, it's just all emotions. It's all processing emotions and feelings about things. like by like retelling and, opinions about people and this and that. And I can't believe they said this and this and that and that. And it's like, yeah, that's not emotions. Like, what is that? I don't know, right? Okay. So infants and children, like, let's just jump right in. Back in. Infants and children amplify and act out emotions and learn to understand what they are and how they work by how parents and caregivers react to their behavior. Attuned parents respond by mirroring back, which teaches children how effective their emotions are at communicating inner wants and needs with others. A child learns to understand its feelings through this mirror. But suppose parents are highly inconsistent or absent when responding. In these cases, children grow to distrust the effectiveness of their emotional communication, questioning their ability to communicate rather than questioning the parent's ability to respond. Invalidated or failed attempts to mirror with young children can shift into behavior patterns of emotional contagion. The attempt to understand the overwhelm of arising emotions by wanting others to feel the same way. A child or adult may use emotional contagion if it becomes emotionally overwhelmed, often amplifying irritation and frustration in an effort to use mirrored pain or fear in the eyes of its loved ones to see the emotions that are rising within itself. So I want to kind of like make a like, or just kind of or emphasize that, which is emotional contagion is when there are rising emotions that are overwhelming and like a lack of literacy. So there's this function that just kind of happens, and it's certainly not driven by like a conscious drive, which is to see in the face of the other person the feelings you're having. And so it's like, you should feel the way I feel right now. Like that's like an emotional, like that's a second hub like adaptation that can be pretty harmful, and for both parties, because the person that experiences that aggression, because it's usually aggression and assertion, um, I mean, I guess it can be other things, but here we'll talk about where it's like interrupting and stressing, is it's hard for both parties because the person receiving it um, is feeling probably scared or upset, like, or it's just, or it's like an activation. But the person who's doing it doesn't understand where it's coming from. So there's a tendency for the person who is heightening things to see it in the face of the other person, to be mirrored by them as a way to understand what they're feeling. Doesn't feel like that when it's happening, but just in like their self-concept is affected by that because it's a terrifying thing to see yourself doing that to somebody. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of shame about the fact that they've done this. In fact, there certainly are folks in the myriad of interviews that I've, like, just in conversations and like discussions about shame, and like things that people are the most ashamed of. This is one where people have significant amounts of shame because it's just so confusing and it feels like there's something very dark within them that would make them do that. But I'm here to say that this is actually about emotional literacy. So yeah, listen. Nice try if you're trying to be mean to yourself. There's no way out. Like, the truth of the matter is like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not flawed. Um, yeah, just adapted. Okay, let's see. Emotional contagion is an outcome of emotional illiteracy and is not within and is not within conscious control. The inability to attune, to handle emotional voltage, and contain and manage intense feelings comes from a lack of development that becomes a profound blind spot for self awareness. Remember that this development happens before memories can form. A perpetrator of emotional contagion creates an environment in which the rest of the family tiptoes around this potentially explosive person, which hijacks the expression and development of the emotional capacity of others within that household. And so the pattern often gets passed down to the next generation. All right, we did it. We did it. We did it. Great job. Great job, team. We made it. If you made it this far, I mean, we are doing it. We're just transforming ourselves together here. So, anyhow, just sending you lots of love. Likes, comments are so appreciated and validating. And yeah, if you've gotten this far, I'm really excited. I'm really excited. This is really we're getting into the stuff that's pretty transformational. And so one of the other things is I'm going to be doing, and this is like, I think these videos are going to outlive the existence of these things, but I'm going to be doing a free series of classes which are the getting into parinama. And this I'm going to do one cycle of them for free and allow anybody who would like to attend. And it'll contain some materials, and then there's going to be a weekly session. I'm going to run for 5 weeks, and yeah, more to come on that. It's going to be starting in about a week and a half. So stay tuned, and maybe when you watch this, it's already happened. It's very likely. But sending you lots of love wherever you are right now. Okay, bye for now.